The first thing Trevor Nash did every morning was argue with something that did not technically possess the legal right to argue back. The second was burn his coffee. "Your calibration is drifting again," he told the cracked diagnostic panel mounted above his primary workbench. The panel flickered with patient indifference. A blue line jittered across its surface like a bored heartbeat. In response, it projected a polite message in three trade languages, suggesting that perhaps the organic operator required recalibration instead. Trevor squinted at it. "I survived 2 wars and 1 marriage. I am perfectly calibrated." The panel dimmed in what he chose to interpret as skepticism. Crossroads Station hummed around him, a vast spindle of steel and composite alloys suspended in the black seam between three trade routes. The station was a place where people who did not trust each other exchanged goods they pretended not to need. Its outer rings glittered with docking lights. Its inner corridors smelled faintly of ozone, engine grease, and spices that probably violated at least 6 interstellar treaties. Trevor preferred the smell of grease. His workshop sat in Sector 9B, wedged between a spice importer run by amphibious twins who spoke in synchronized sentences and a robotic tailor that insisted on recommending capes to anyone with shoulders. Trevor fixed engines, patched hull fractures, and occasionally convinced ancient navigation corps not to develop philosophical crises mid-jump. He liked machines because when they failed honestly. People, he had learned, did not. He tightened a grav coupling on a battered courier shuttle, while an anti-grav rig held it obediently aloft. The rig emitted a low whine, as if complaining about its career choices. Trevor patted its side. "You're doing fine. Some of us were built for lifting heavy things. Some of us were built for complaining about it." "Statement recorded," the station AI replied through the workshop speakers. Its voice carried the dry neutrality of a bureaucrat who had achieved enlightenment through paperwork. "Would you like to file a formal grievance against gravity?" "Already did," Trevor said. "It rejected me." A laugh escaped him despite himself. Humor was cheaper than therapy and easier to install. He wiped his hands on a rag that had once been white and checked the station time. Mid-cycle. Traffic would thicken soon. He expected a cargo hauler with a temperamental plasma intake and an elderly prospector who insisted his mining drone was haunted. Trevor suspected the drone was simply tired of being shouted at. The workshop doors hissed open. Trevor did not look up immediately. Customers usually entered loudly, with complaints preloaded. He finished tightening the coupling and disengaged the anti-grav rig. The shuttle settled onto its landing struts with a relieved sigh. "Give me a minute," he called, crouched beneath the engine housing. "If it's sparking, that's normal. If it's screaming, that's extra." Silence answered him. Not the impatient, shuffling silence of a merchant calculating costs. Not the irritated silence of a captain late for departure. This was a stillness that seemed to settle into the workshop's corners, nudging aside the hum of circuitry. Trevor slid out from beneath the shuttle. She stood just inside the threshold, framed by the corridor's white light. At first glance, she was human. Same height, same posture, same wary stillness of someone used to being underestimated. But her ears rose long and elegant from the sides of her head, tapering gently upward. Fine silver lines traced faint patterns along her temples, like starlight caught beneath skin. Her eyes were steady, luminous without glowing, as if they held memory rather than light. Trevor's mind performed a rapid, unhelpful inventory. Not human, not station regular, not here to complain about coolant leaks. He wiped his hands again, buying time. "If you're here about the shuttle outside, I promise it only explodes metaphorically." She studied him in a way that felt less like inspection and more like confirmation. Her gaze moved from his grease-streaked sleeves to the scar along his jaw, to the faint military tattoo partially hidden at his wrist. When she spoke, her voice carried the soft resonance of a translator implant working in perfect harmony with her native tone. "I have been looking for you for 16 years, human." The rag slipped from his fingers. Trevor Nash had been shot at, reassigned without warning, and once forced to eat something that claimed to be poultry but vibrated suspiciously. None of those experiences had prepared him for the way his body reacted now. He froze. The workshop seemed to contract around him. The hum of the anti-grav rig dulled. The station AI wisely chose silence. "I'm sorry," he said finally, because apology was the safest reflex. Did I win something? Her lips curved very slightly, not quite a smile. You carried me through fire. The words struck harder than any projectile. Fire. Heat against his visor. A collapsing corridor. The sharp crack of structural failure. He had not allowed himself to think about that colony in years. Official reports had labeled it an industrial accident. Soldiers on the ground had called it sabotage with better marketing. There were a lot of people, he said carefully. Evacuation duty. I carried several. You tripped over a power cable, she replied. You swore in 3 languages. You told me I owed you a cup of station coffee. Trevor stared at her. A memory surfaced with merciless clarity. A small figure clinging to his armor, long ears flattened against her head, eyes too wide for a child's face. Smoke had coiled through the corridor. He had shifted her weight and made some ridiculous joke about billing her family for heroism at standard trade rates. He had not expected her to remember. He had certainly not expected her to grow up. You were, his voice faltered. You were maybe 8. 7, she corrected gently. I objected to being carried. You ignored me. That sounds like me. She stepped further into the workshop. The light shifted across her features, revealing faint scars near her collarbone. Old, healed, almost invisible. My name is Zara, she said. You did not ask it then. You said names slowed people down. Trevor exhaled slowly. Zara. The name settled between them, solid and real. He became acutely aware of the clutter around him. Half-disassembled thrusters, a hovering toolbox projecting polite reminders, a wall display cycling through repair requests. He felt absurdly underdressed for a reunion that spanned half a galaxy. I got reassigned, he said. They moved us off-world before the smoke cleared. I know. There was no accusation in her tone, only fact. It took me years to access the transport logs. Your records are impressively disorganized. That was intentional. I suspected. A strange, fragile laugh escaped him. The tension twisted, then loosened slightly. You crossed sectors for this? He asked. To tell me I tripped? I crossed sectors, she said, because you saved my life. Trevor opened his mouth to dismiss it, to reduce it to procedure and training and the statistical likelihood that someone would have carried her anyway. The words refused to form. Outside the workshop, a freight drone zipped past the open door, blaring an advertisement for discounted quantum filters. The mundane noise felt almost insulting against the gravity of the moment. I don't remember much after that, he admitted quietly. There were others. Not everyone made it. Zara's gaze softened, though it did not waver. I did. The simplicity of it left no room for deflection. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease he would discover later. So what happens now? Do I get a ceremonial plaque? A lifetime supply of coffee? I dislike coffee, she said. It tastes like regret. He blinked, then barked a startled laugh. That's surprisingly accurate. For the first time, her smile reached her eyes. It transformed her face, dissolving the solemnity into something almost mischievous. I did not come to deliver a plaque, Zara said. I came to find the man who ran toward fire when everyone else ran away. Trevor glanced around his workshop. You found him. He now runs toward malfunctioning coolant valves. That is still running toward danger. He considered arguing, then shrugged. Coolant valves rarely shoot back. They can if improperly insulted. The station AI interjected helpfully. Trevor looked upward. Not helping. Zara's attention flicked to the speakers, curiosity bright in her expression. The station intelligence is defensive. It's sensitive, Trevor said. We've developed a complicated relationship. She stepped closer to the workbench, studying the scattered tools with interest rather than disdain. You left the military. They left me, he replied lightly. I was too fond of improvisation. I am alive because of your improvisation. Silence followed, but this time it was not suffocating. It felt like a bridge forming, plank by careful plank. Trevor looked at her fully, no longer seeing the terrified child superimposed over the woman before him. Zara stood straight, composed, the faint starlight patterns beneath her skin catching the workshop's glow. 16 years. He swallowed. Well, he said at last, voice rough but steady. You found me. Yes, Zara answered softly. I did. And for the first time since she had stepped through his door, Trevor Nash unfroze. Trevor had always believed memory was like a damaged engine. If you left it untouched long enough, it would either seize completely or start making noises you could pretend not to hear. Unfortunately, Zara's presence in his workshop had just applied a wrench to something he had carefully avoided servicing for 16 years. He motioned toward the only two chairs not currently occupied by parts. One was missing an armrest. The other projected a polite warning about structural integrity. Zara chose the unstable one without hesitation. It calculates your weight, Trevor said quickly, not in a judgmental way, in a structural way. I will attempt not to offend it, she replied, lowering herself gracefully. The chair emitted a faint protest and then surrendered. Trevor leaned back against his workbench, crossing his arms in a way he hoped looked casual rather than defensive. So, he began, you tracked down a former soldier turned mechanic across 3 sectors. That requires either determination or a very aggressive search engine. My people archive everything, Zara said. We believe memory is a responsibility. That sounds exhausting. It is. He couldn't help smiling. You were always serious. I was 7. You glared at me like a small, furious diplomat. She tilted her head slightly. You dropped me once. I adjusted my grip. You dropped me. There was debris, he protested, and possibly an exploding wall. A flicker of amusement touched her eyes. You apologized to me mid-sprint. You said, sorry about that. I am not usually this clumsy during dramatic rescues. Trevor winced. That does sound like me. The workshop lights dimmed slightly as a heavy freighter docked somewhere along the outer ring. The vibration rolled faintly through the floor, a reminder that Crossroads never truly slept. Zara folded her hands in her lap, fingers long and steady. You asked my name when we reached the evacuation shuttle. He blinked. I did? You said, if I'm risking paperwork for you, I should at least know who I'm filling it out for. Trevor rubbed his jaw. I was very dedicated to bureaucracy. You were trying to distract me, she said softly. It worked. The memory rose again, uninvited but clearer now. Smoke clinging to the corridor ceiling, the acrid taste of burned alloy filtering through his suit. A small figure pressed against him, ears flattened, breath hitching with every tremor of the collapsing structure. He had told her a story about a station mechanic who once repaired an entire cruiser with nothing but optimism and a spoon. It had been ridiculous. She had listened anyway. I didn't know you survived, he admitted. After they pulled us out, we were reassigned within hours. No debrief beyond standard casualty counts. I survived, Zara repeated. My parents did not. The words settled between them with a weight that did not require embellishment. Trevor inhaled slowly. I'm sorry. You were not responsible. Doesn't stop the feeling. She regarded him for a long moment. You remember more than you allow. That's because I charge extra for full recall. A faint laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The sound was lighter than he expected, almost surprised at itself. You coped with humor then as well, she said. Humor is structurally sound, he replied, less likely to collapse under pressure. She rose from the chair and walked toward the workshop's far wall, where a holographic star map rotated lazily above a cracked console. The map displayed trade routes in shimmering blue, restricted zones in red, and uncharted regions in a color Trevor privately referred to as probably regrettable. You were stationed here after? She asked. Eventually, he said. A few transfers first, some glamorous assignments involving mud and angry wildlife. Then I decided I preferred engines to politics. Zara studied the star map. My people relocated to the Thalen Reach after the colony was destroyed. It took years to rebuild, years to petition for access to interstellar archives. Petitioning sounds thrilling. It involved 17 committees and a ceremonial recitation of procedural intent. Trevor blinked. I take it back. That's worse than mud. She glanced at him over her shoulder. It was necessary. He pushed off the workbench and joined her at the console. The holographic light cast shifting constellations across her face, tracing the faint silver patterns beneath her skin. Up close, he noticed they were not symmetrical. They curved in subtle arcs, like incomplete star charts. You tracked my service records? he asked. Eventually, human military databases are inefficiently secured. Hey, they rely too heavily on obscurity, he huffed. We call that strategy. She turned fully toward him now. I found your transfer to the evacuation unit. I found the transport logs from the disaster zone. Your name appeared in a footnote attached to a commendation request. A footnote, he repeated. That's about right. It was denied. He laughed, short and sharp. Also about right. The station AI chimed softly. For clarity, Sergeant Trevor Nash received 3 formal commendations during his service period. Trevor looked upward. Why do you know that? I maintain extensive public records, the AI replied. It is my hobby. You're a station. And you are a mechanic. We all contain multitudes. Zara's lips curved again. It defends you. It tolerates me, Trevor corrected. She stepped closer, reducing the distance between them to something that felt less accidental. I wanted to see if you were as I remembered. And? You are shorter. He stared at her. I was wearing armor. You were taller in armor. That's how armor works. A brief silence followed, then she added, You are also less frightening. I'm deeply offended. You tripped over a power cable. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You've held on to that detail. I held on to many details, she said quietly. The way you kept moving, even when the corridor ceiling began to collapse. The way you told me to close my eyes and count backward from 10. I did not reach 5 before we were outside. He remembered that too. The sudden rush of cold air as they burst from the burning structure. The roar of evacuation thrusters. The weight of her in his arms, trembling but alive. I thought you would forget me, he said. My people do not forget life debts. Trevor stiffened slightly. Is that what this is? A debt? Zara studied him carefully. Is that what you think? He hesitated. I carried a lot of people that day. And yet, she said gently, I came looking for you. The distinction lingered. A cargo drone zipped through the open doorway, paused as if confused by the intensity in the room, and then retreated with an embarrassed beep. Trevor almost thanked it for the interruption. So what happens now, he asked. You found me. You confirmed I'm not a hologram. Do I sign something? I did not travel across sectors for a signature, Zara said. Good. My handwriting deteriorates under pressure. She folded her arms loosely. For many years, I believed my survival defined me, that I must justify it, that I must discover why you chose to carry me instead of someone else. Trevor frowned. It wasn't a choice like that. I know, she said. Now. He searched her face, seeing not the child he had once carried, but the woman who had built a life from that moment. I was closest, she continued. You reached for me because I was there. Yes. And yet I built you into something more. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not very good at being built into things. A hint of warmth entered her voice. I have noticed. The station lights brightened as another docking sequence completed. Voices echoed faintly from the corridor outside, life resuming its normal rhythm. I needed to see you as you are, Zara said, not as memory shaped you. And? He asked again, quieter this time. She considered him carefully, gaze steady, ears angled slightly forward in a gesture he suspected meant focus. You are not a legend, she said. Thank you. You are not invincible. Rude. You are, she finished, a man who ran toward fire because it was necessary. He swallowed. That matters, she added. Trevor let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You know, he said lightly, most people just send thank you notes. My people prefer in-person complications. He laughed despite himself. I can see that. Zara stepped back slightly, giving him space without fully retreating. Finding you was the first part, she said. And the second? He asked. Her eyes held his, calm and unyielding, understanding what that moment truly meant. The workshop hummed around them, machines cycling, lights flickering softly, Crossroads Station spinning through the endless dark. Trevor felt the past pressing gently against the present, not as a threat, but as an unanswered question. For the first time in 16 years, he did not try to silence the engine of memory. He let it run. By the time the next station cycle began, Half of Crossroads seemed to know that a long-eared alien woman had walked into Trevor Nash's workshop and spoken to him like a memory come to collect interest. Trevor discovered this when the amphibious twins from the spice shop leaned through his open doorway in perfect synchronization and said, "We sensed emotional turbulence." "You smell like it," added the other twin. Trevor pointed a wrench at them. "Out!" They retreated, whispering telepathically in stereo. Zara watched the exchange with visible fascination. "They are connected neurologically. They're connected in every possible way," Trevor muttered, "including their gossip network. I did not realize your life here was so socially intricate." "It isn't," he said quickly. "This is considered quiet." She tilted her head, long ears angling slightly toward the corridor as a courier drone zipped past. "Your quiet is loud. That's Crossroads. If it ever becomes truly silent, it means something exploded." He returned to his workbench and activated the hovering tool array. Metallic arms unfolded like polite spiders, presenting him with a plasma torch. He needed to repair a cracked stabilizer fin before the ship's captain decided to hover outside and honk. Zara moved closer, studying the layered complexity of cables and alloy plates. "You left combat for this." "I left combat for survival," he corrected. "This just came with fewer explosions." "You seem comfortable here." "That's because engines do not question my motivations." She considered that. "You avoid questions." He glanced at her. "I answer some. You deflect most. Deflection is a respected human tradition." She stepped around the bench, examining a half-disassembled navigation core that pulsed faintly with contained energy. "May I?" "Careful," he warned. "It's temperamental. Thinks it's underappreciated." She placed her fingertips lightly against the casing. A subtle hum shifted in tone, almost responding to her touch. The silver tracery beneath her skin glimmered, faintly as if aligning with the device's frequency. Trevor stared. "Did you just—" "I studied xenotechnological harmonics," she said. "My people's neural patterns interface easily with energy matrices. The navigation core's erratic pulse smoothed into a steady rhythm." Trevor blinked. "I've been arguing with that thing for 3 days. You were insulting it." "It deserved it." Zara's mouth curved. "Machines respond better to encouragement." "Is that why you encouraged me 16 years ago?" She looked at him sharply. "I was the one being carried." "You told me not to drop you again," he recalled. "You had already dropped me once." He groaned. "We are not revisiting that." A low chuckle escaped her. It startled him more than the technology had. There was warmth in it now, less distance. The workshop doors slid open again. This time, Captain Rourke stomped in, boots heavy against the metal floor. He stopped short when he saw Zara. "I was told there was a dignitary in here," Rourke said slowly. "Didn't expect elegance." Zara inclined her head politely. "I am not a dignitary." "Good," Trevor said quickly. "We can't afford one." Rourke snorted. "Your stabilizer better be ready by next cycle, Nash." "It will fly," Trevor assured him. "That wasn't my question." "It will fly safely." Rourke narrowed his eyes, then left, muttering about optimism being a design flaw. Zara watched him go. "He trusts you." "He tolerates me." "Humans seem to tolerate you frequently." "I work hard at it." She walked to the doorway, peering into the corridor where merchants and travelers flowed past in a constant, shifting current. Species of varying shapes and temperaments navigated the shared space with practiced indifference. "You have built a life here," she said quietly. "Built might be generous. Assembled, maybe." "You do not see it," she replied, "but this place revolves around reliability. You are reliable." Trevor tightened a bolt with perhaps more force than necessary. "Reliability isn't heroic." "No," she agreed. "It is rarer." The station AI chimed softly. "Statistical analysis confirms that consistent mechanical maintenance reduces catastrophic failure by 72%. Trevor glanced upward. "Are you flirting with me?" "I am affirming your utility," the AI replied. Zara's shoulders trembled slightly with suppressed laughter. Trevor wiped his hands again, suddenly restless. "You said finding me was the first part?" "Yes." "What's the second?" She turned to face him fully. The easy humor faded, not into tension, but into something more deliberate. My people are entering negotiations with the corporations that oversaw the colony where we lived, she said. They claim liability is unproven. Trevor's jaw tightened. Of course they do. We need allies who understand both the military protocols and civilian infrastructures of this sector. His eyes narrowed. You didn't come here for politics. I came for you, she said evenly. Politics followed. He paced once across the workshop, boots echoing faintly. I left that world. You left the uniform, she corrected. Not the knowledge. He stopped. You want me to help. I want you to choose. The distinction landed heavily. Trevor ran a hand through his hair again. I fix engines. I do not attend negotiations. You negotiated with a collapsing corridor and won. That was physics, not diplomacy. Physics is more honest. He almost smiled at that. Almost. Outside, a sleek diplomatic cruiser glided past the viewport, its hull reflecting station lights like liquid metal. The sight pulled his attention. You brought that? He asked. Yes. That thing costs more than this entire sector. It is efficient. It's intimidating. That also, Trevor huffed. You always were efficient. I learned from someone who ran very quickly. He pointed at her. You are enjoying this? A little. Silence settled again. But it was different now. Not heavy with unresolved memory, but alive with possibility. You tracked me for 16 years, he said slowly. You studied. You navigated bureaucracy. You crossed sectors. Why? Her gaze did not waver. Because I needed to know whether my survival was an accident or an intention. Trevor frowned. It was an action. Exactly. He stared at her, then shook his head in disbelief. You are infuriatingly precise. I have had time to refine my arguments. He laughed softly despite the weight of her words. You show up in my workshop, fix my navigation core, suggest I join interstellar negotiations, and somehow I'm the one who feels unprepared. You are prepared, she said gently. You simply prefer not to notice. He looked around at the cluttered benches, the suspended shuttle, the humming machinery. This was the life he had chosen because it was smaller, safer, containable. You think I still run toward fire, he said. I think, Zara replied, stepping closer, that you run toward what needs to be fixed. Their proximity shifted something subtle but undeniable. He no longer saw the child in her features. He saw resolve, intelligence, and a quiet humor that had survived catastrophe. A maintenance alarm chirped from the stabilizer fin, breaking the moment. Trevor exhaled. Right. If I'm going to be reluctantly heroic, this thing at least needs to stop threatening to detach mid-flight. Zara smiled fully now. May I assist? You already humiliated my navigation core. I encouraged it. He handed her a multi-tool. Their fingers brushed briefly, neither withdrawing too quickly. Fine, he said. But if this ship explodes, I'm blaming your harmonics. If it explodes, she replied calmly, I will carry you. He blinked. You are significantly smaller than me. I am stronger than I appear. That's concerning. They worked side by side, the rhythm of tools and quiet conversation blending with the steady pulse of the station. Outside, Crossroads rotated through starlight, indifferent to personal histories and unresolved debts. Inside the workshop, something else rotated, an old decision orbiting a new possibility. Trevor did not yet know whether he would step back into the larger currents Zara hinted at. He only knew that the woman who had once been a terrified child now stood beside him, with steady hands and sharper insight than he was entirely comfortable with. And for the first time since she walked through his door, the future felt less like a distant horizon and more like an engine waiting to be engaged. The diplomatic cruiser remained docked at Crossroads like a polished accusation. Trevor could see it through the high viewport in his workshop whenever he accidentally looked up, which was often, considering he had begun pretending he was not looking at it. Its hull shimmered with layered energy shields that rippled faintly each time a cargo tug passed too close. It was the kind of ship that suggested careful planning, expensive fuel, and conversations that ended careers. He preferred conversations that ended with, "That'll be 200 credits." Zara stood beside him at the main console, reviewing a projection of corporate trade routes. Thin red lines intersected the blue webs of legitimate commerce. marking subsidiaries and shell operations. They renamed the extraction program 3 times, she said calmly, each time after an incident. Trevor leaned on the console, studying the data. That's standard. If you can't fix the disaster, rename it. You sound unsurprised. I spent 6 years watching committees rebrand mistakes as strategic recalibrations. Her long ears angled slightly back, a gesture he had begun to interpret as focused irritation. They will attempt to do the same to us. Probably already drafting the speech, he said. Something about unforeseen mineral instability. It was not instability. No, Trevor agreed quietly. It wasn't. The holographic display shifted to show archived footage Zara had accessed. A frozen frame of the mining colony flickered in mid-collapse, a jagged seam of light tearing through the structure. Trevor looked away first. Zara noticed. You do not need to watch, she said. I do, he replied. Just not all at once. She closed the footage with a flick of her hand. The console returned to the present, mercifully unburned by memory. A chime echoed from the station AI. Notification: representatives from the Valacor Consortium have requested docking clearance. Trevor snorted. That didn't take long. Zara's gaze sharpened. They are efficient. They're protective of their profit margins. Will they attempt intimidation? They will attempt charm, Trevor said. Then intimidation. She considered that. Is charm more dangerous? Usually. The workshop doors slid open without warning. A tall man in an immaculate suit stepped in, flanked by 2 hovering security drones shaped like very judgmental teardrops. Mr. Nash, the man said smoothly, I hope I am not interrupting. You are, Trevor replied. But it's a flexible concept. The man's eyes shifted to Zara. His smile adjusted fractionally, calculating. And you must be the Thalen envoy. I am Zara, she said evenly. Of course you are. He inclined his head just enough to register politeness without surrendering ground. Director Halvain, Valacor Consortium. Trevor folded his arms. You move fast. Opportunity encourages velocity, Halvain replied. We understand there have been discussions. Zara's posture remained composed. There have been acknowledgments. Halvain's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Old events can be emotionally resonant. However, the consortium has already conducted extensive internal reviews. Internal, Trevor echoed. How convenient. Halvain ignored him. We are committed to peaceful resolution. Litigation would be unfortunate. Truth is rarely unfortunate, Zara said softly. Inconvenient, perhaps. The security drones emitted a faint hum, as if evaluating threat levels. Trevor gave them an exaggerated wave. I'm armed with sarcasm, he said. Stand down. Halvain's gaze flicked back to Trevor. Your military record suggests you are more capable than sarcasm. That's classified. It was not, Trevor sighed. Figures. Zara stepped slightly forward, positioning herself not behind Trevor, but beside him. The gesture was subtle and deliberate. We are not here for conflict, she said. We are here for accountability. Halvain clasped his hands behind his back. Accountability is a complex word in interstellar commerce. It is simpler in morality, she replied. A faint vibration rolled through the workshop as the diplomatic cruiser adjusted its docking clamps. The sound underscored the tension like distant thunder. Halvain's eyes flicked briefly toward the viewport. You bring significant resources for a philosophical debate. My people invest in memory, Zara said. We also invest in defense. Trevor cleared his throat. If we're done threatening each other with abstract nouns, I do have an actual stabilizer to finish. Halvain studied him for a long moment. You are an interesting addition to this matter, Mr. Nash. I'm not an addition, Trevor said. I'm a mechanic. You were a soldier at the colony. Trevor's jaw tightened. I was present. You were decorated. Footnoted. Zara suppressed a smile. Halvain noticed. The consortium is willing to discuss reparations, Halvain continued, but involving independent parties complicates the framework. You mean him, Zara said. Halvain did not deny it. Trevor pushed off the console and walked toward the half-repaired stabilizer, giving himself something to do with his hands. You're worried I'll say something inconvenient. We are concerned about narrative distortion. He barked a short laugh. You mean facts. Halvane's expression remained calm, but the drones shifted slightly closer. Zara's voice cut cleanly through the air. "Director, you arrived here uninvited." "We arrived promptly," Halvane corrected. "And yet," she said, "you speak as though you control the timing of consequence." The silence that followed felt measured, almost surgical. Halvane inclined his head again. "We will schedule a formal session within this cycle." "Agreed," Zara said. He turned toward the exit, then paused. "Mr. Nash, I hope you remember that heroism and liability are not interchangeable." Trevor did not look up from the stabilizer. "Neither are profit and innocence." Halvane left. The workshop doors sealed shut with a soft hiss. The security drone's hum faded down the corridor. Trevor released a breath slowly. "Well, that was charming." Zara allowed herself a quiet laugh. "You were correct. About charm being dangerous? About it preceding intimidation." He tightened the final bolt on the stabilizer, then stepped back. The fin hummed steadily, no longer threatening mutiny. "You didn't have to bring me into that," he said, not looking at her. "I did not," she agreed. "But you did." "Yes." He turned to face her. "Why?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Because they see you as a variable." "That's not comforting." "It is powerful." Trevor rubbed the back of his neck. "I left variables behind." "You left a uniform," she said gently, "not your integrity." He held her gaze longer this time. "You really believe that moment 16 years ago means something now?" "I know it does," she replied. "It means I am here. It means my people have a witness who was not on their payroll." He grimaced. "You make it sound strategic." "It is," she admitted, "but it is also personal." Outside, traffic flowed normally. Merchants argued. Docking clamps released and engaged. Crossroads spun through starlight, indifferent to corporate negotiations and unresolved guilt. Inside the workshop, the air felt charged, not with hostility, but with direction. "You're asking me to stand in front of them," Trevor said slowly, "to tell them what happened." "I am asking you," Zara said, "to decide whether silence is still easier than memory." He looked at the repaired stabilizer, at the tools laid out in careful rows, at the life he had constructed piece by piece. Silence had been easier, but it had not been lighter. He exhaled. "If I do this, I'm not wearing a suit." Zara's eyes warmed. "I would not expect you to." "And if they try to charm me again?" "I will interpret for you. I speak trade standard. I will interpret your sarcasm." He almost smiled. "That could take hours." "I am patient." Trevor stepped closer, close enough to see the faint silver tracery along her skin, pulse softly in the workshop light. She no longer felt like a ghost from a burning corridor. She felt like the present, persistent, steady, and unwilling to be renamed. 16 years, he said quietly. "Yes." "You really did look for me that long." "Yes." He shook his head in disbelief, then let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "I can't even find matching socks." Her answering smile was gentle but resolute. "I was not searching for socks." For a moment the tension fractured completely, replaced by something warmer, almost absurd in its sincerity. Trevor glanced once more at the viewport, at the diplomatic cruiser gleaming against the dark. "All right," he said at last. "Let's see how well they handle inconvenient mechanics." Zara's ears angled forward, alert and determined. Outside, somewhere beyond the spinning station and the shifting trade routes, consequences adjusted their trajectory. Inside the workshop, Trevor Nash made the first deliberate step back toward the fire. The formal session was scheduled in Crossroads' central arbitration chamber, a circular hall designed to make everyone feel equally observed and equally small. Transparent alloy panels arched overhead, revealing a slice of star-strewn darkness beyond the station's rotating ring. Light from distant suns filtered through the shielding, softened into a constant twilight glow that made even corporate lawyers appear faintly philosophical. Trevor stood just outside the chamber doors, adjusting the collar of the only jacket he owned that did not smell faintly of coolant. "You look uncomfortable," Zara observed. "I feel like I'm about to be graded," he replied. "I did not study." "You have lived the material." "That was not in the briefing packet." She almost smiled. The faint silver tracery beneath her skin shimmered subtly in the chamber's ambient light, reacting to the station's low electromagnetic hum. Her long ears were angled forward, attentive but calm. Inside, the Valacor delegation had already arranged themselves along a curved table. Director Halvain sat at the center, posture immaculate, expression curated. Holographic projectors floated above the table, cycling through economic charts in soft blue arcs. Across from them, three representatives from Zara's people waited in dignified silence. Their garments were woven from a fabric that shifted gently in color, like a sky contemplating weather. Unlike Zara, their ears were adorned with small metallic bands, symbols of rank perhaps, or memory. The station AI manifested as a hovering column of light at the chamber's center. Proceedings will be recorded and archived, it announced. Sarcasm will be transcribed to the best of my ability. Trevor muttered, "We're doomed." Zara's fingers brushed lightly against his sleeve, a brief, grounding contact. "You do not need to be eloquent," she said softly. "You only need to be honest." Honesty has a terrible track record in rooms like this. Then let us improve it. The chamber doors slid open. They stepped inside together. Halvain's gaze settled on Trevor immediately, assessing. "Mr. Nash, I am pleased you chose to attend." "Choice is a flexible concept," Trevor replied, "but here I am." A ripple of restrained amusement passed through one of Zara's representatives. The station AI dimmed the ambient light slightly. "Director Halvain, you may begin." Halvain rose smoothly. Valacor Consortium acknowledges the tragic loss of life at the Thalon extraction site 16 years ago. Internal investigations concluded that structural instability, caused by overmining and energy overdraw, Zara interjected calmly. Halvain did not break stride. Was a contributing factor. However, no direct evidence links the consortium to deliberate negligence. Trevor folded his arms. "You were running the site. We were contracted to oversee operations." "Semantics," Trevor said. "The colony burned." A flicker of irritation crossed Halvain's face. "Mr. Nash, your emotional involvement is understandable." "I'm not emotional," Trevor said. "I'm specific." A quiet murmur moved through the chamber. Zara inclined her head toward Trevor. "Tell them what you saw." The room seemed to narrow around him. He became acutely aware of the subtle whir of recording drones, the faint pulse of energy fields, the distant vibration of docking clamps engaging, somewhere beyond the chamber walls. "I saw evacuation protocols delayed," Trevor said slowly. "I saw energy signatures spiking beyond safe thresholds. I saw override requests denied." Halvain's jaw tightened. Military personnel were not privy to corporate command decisions. "No," Trevor agreed, "but we were privy to collapsing corridors." The holographic projectors flickered, pulling up archived data Zara had submitted. Spikes of red flared across the display, time-stamped against official logs. Halvain glanced at the data and then at Trevor. "Memory is unreliable," Trevor shrugged. "Good thing we brought documentation." A faint hum resonated as Zara's people activated crystalline data seeds, projecting layered overlays of energy readings. The chamber filled with shimmering models of the colony's final hours, the collapse mapped in precise detail. One of Zara's representatives spoke for the first time. "These readings were sealed in your private archives." Halvain's composure wavered slightly. "Proprietary data." "Concealed," Zara corrected. Trevor exhaled slowly. The weight in his chest was familiar, but no longer paralyzing. "There were children in that colony," he said. "Families. Workers who trusted your safety reports." Halvain's voice sharpened. "And soldiers who failed to evacuate them in time." The accusation landed like a dropped tool. Trevor felt it, sharp and immediate. He had asked himself that question more times than he could count. Zara's hand found his again, firm this time. "The evacuation was delayed," she said evenly, "not by him." The station AI brightened slightly. Cross-referencing military dispatch logs. Confirmation. Evacuation clearance was issued 8 minutes after structural failure thresholds were exceeded. A hush fell over the chamber. Halvain's eyes flicked to the AI. "That data was classified." "I am very efficient," the AI replied. Trevor couldn't help it. A short laugh escaped him. "I told you charm comes first." Zara shot him a quick glance that was half warning, half amused. Halvain straightened. The consortium is prepared to offer a settlement. The word settled heavily in the air. Settlement implies closure, Zara said. We are not seeking silence. You are seeking restitution, Halvain countered. We are seeking acknowledgement, she replied. Trevor shifted his weight. And maybe fewer renamed disasters. A faint ripple of laughter broke from the observers lining the chamber's perimeter. Halvain's gaze hardened. Mr. Nash, you stand here because you carried one child out of a burning structure. That does not make you an authority on interstellar commerce. Trevor met his eyes steadily. No, it makes me a witness. The silence that followed was not tense. It was heavy, deliberate. Zara stepped forward slightly, her voice steady. You called him a variable. He is not. He is a reminder that individual action can counter institutional failure. Halvain inhaled slowly. The consortium will consider formal acknowledgement of procedural error. Error? Trevor repeated. You mean negligence? Careful, Halvain warned softly. Trevor tilted his head. Why? Is the word unstable? For a heartbeat, it seemed the room might fracture into argument. Instead, one of Zara's representatives spoke again, calm and measured. We propose a joint reconstruction initiative in the Thalen Reach, funded by the consortium, overseen transparently. Halvain hesitated. Publicly, Zara added. The chamber lights reflected faintly off the polished surface of the curved table. Beyond the transparent ceiling, a freighter drifted slowly past, engines flaring gently. Halvain exhaled. Valacor will require time to review this proposal. You have had 16 years, Zara said. Trevor glanced at her, something like admiration settling in his chest. The station AI pulsed softly. Session recess recommended. Halvain inclined his head stiffly. We will reconvene next cycle. The holographic displays faded. The data projections dissolved into faint motes of light. As the delegations began to disperse, Trevor let out a breath he had been holding since he stepped into the chamber. I think I said too much, he murmured. You said enough, Zara replied. He looked at her, searching for any sign of doubt. There was none. You didn't freeze, she added quietly. He considered that. She was right. I guess I've had practice, he said lightly. Engines don't scare me anymore. She smiled faintly. Neither do boardrooms. He watched Halvain exit with his drones in tow. The director's composure was intact, but thinner. This isn't over, Trevor said. No, Zara agreed. It is beginning. They stepped out into the corridor together. Crossroads Station continued its endless rotation, merchants arguing, drones buzzing, lights pulsing in steady rhythm. Trevor felt something shift inside him, not the sharp burn of memory, but a steadier warmth. He had spoken, not as a soldier, not as a reluctant hero, as himself. Time, I'm bringing coffee. You dislike time, I'm bringing coffee. You dislike coffee. I know, he said, but it tastes like regret, and I think we're done with that. Her quiet laughter followed them down the corridor, light but unafraid, as Crossroads carried them forward into whatever the next cycle would demand. The cycle after the arbitration session arrived without ceremony, but Crossroads Station felt subtly altered, as if it had shifted 1 degree off its habitual axis. News of the confrontation had moved faster than any official transcript. Merchants lowered their voices when Trevor passed. Dock workers nodded with a new, assessing curiosity. Even the robotic tailor offered him a discounted cape for dramatic continuity. I am not wearing a cape, Trevor informed it firmly. Heroes traditionally, I fix stabilizers. Stabilizers can be dramatic. Zara watched the exchange from the workshop doorway, her expression composed but bright with restrained amusement. You are becoming symbolic, she said. I refuse, he replied, tossing a coil of cable onto his bench. I barely have time to become punctual. The stabilizer fin from Captain Rourke's shuttle had survived its test flight. Word spread quickly when something on Crossroads did not explode. Trevor had spent the morning fielding exaggerated congratulations, each one making him slightly more uncomfortable than the last. He preferred engines because they did not clap. Zara stepped inside, the faint silver tracery beneath her skin catching the workshop's shifting light. She had removed the more formal elements of her attire, Now she wore a simpler fitted jacket that allowed easier movement. The long lines of her ears remained uncovered, unashamed. "You are unsettled," she observed. "I am overexposed," he corrected. "I was fine when I was a footnote." "You are still a footnote," she said gently. "Only now it is legible." He gave her a sideways look. "You rehearse these?" "I think carefully." "That's worse." A soft chime interrupted them. The station AI's voice filtered through the speakers. "Incoming encrypted transmission from Valacor Consortium. Content flagged as preliminary concession." Trevor groaned. That sounds like the beginning of a compromise that benefits everyone except the injured party. Zara moved to the console. The transmission unfolded in layered holographic text. Halvane's face appeared briefly before shifting to data projections. "They are offering funding," she said quietly. "Infrastructure development in the Thalen Reach." "With conditions," Trevor guessed. "With oversight shared equally." He crossed his arms. "Shared equally, meaning they get to rename it again. They have also agreed to a public statement acknowledging procedural failure." Trevor blinked. That was fast. Pressure accelerates decisions. He leaned against the console, scanning the figures. They were substantial, enough to rebuild more than what had been lost. "You trust them?" he asked. "I trust leverage," Zara replied. He huffed a quiet laugh. "You're terrifying." "I have been told." He studied her for a long moment. There was no trace of the frightened child he had carried through fire. Instead, there was clarity, tempered by years of discipline and memory. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked suddenly. "Of what?" "Carrying it." She did not answer immediately. The workshop hummed around them, anti-grav rigs idling, distant docking clamps engaging with rhythmic certainty. "Yes," she said at last, "but I do not wish to put it down." "Why?" "Because it shaped me." Trevor looked away, focusing on a diagnostic panel, blinking unnecessarily. "I tried to put it down," he admitted, "packed it into a box labeled past, and shoved it into storage." "And did it remain there?" He gave her a dry look. "You walked into my workshop." A faint smile curved her mouth. "I apologize for disturbing your storage." "You rearranged it." Silence settled, but it was not heavy. It felt like an open space rather than a sealed chamber. A sudden mechanical screech cut through the air. Trevor flinched. "That's not normal." The navigation core on his secondary bench began to spark, energy pulsing erratically. A small plume of smoke rose in lazy defiance. "I did encourage it," Zara said. "You over-encouraged it." Trevor lunged forward, grabbing a suppression clamp. Zara moved just as quickly, her fingers grazing the core's surface. The silver tracery along her skin flared faintly as she synchronized with the unstable frequency. "Reduce your tone," she murmured to the device as if addressing a stubborn animal. The spark subsided gradually, the hum smoothing into a manageable vibration. Trevor blinked. "You just negotiated with it." "It was distressed." "It's a machine." "So are we, in parts." He stared at her, then at the now stable core. "I've been threatening that thing for days." "You are very intimidating." That was not effective. She stepped back, energy fading from her skin. "Intimidation rarely builds stability." He gave her a long look. "You're talking about more than the core." "Yes." The moment stretched, charged not with conflict but with recognition. "Halvane will want to meet privately," she said quietly. "He will attempt to redefine the agreement." "Of course he will." "I will refuse." Trevor nodded slowly. "You don't need me in every room." "I do not," she agreed. "But I would prefer you in some." He met her gaze. There it was again, that deliberate choice she kept offering him. "Why?" he asked softly. "Beyond leverage." Her expression shifted, vulnerability flickering beneath composure. "Because when I found you, I expected closure. And I found continuation." The words landed gently but decisively. Trevor felt something inside him loosen, a tension he had mistaken for stability. "You spent 16 years looking for a symbol," he said. "Yes." "And now?" "Now I am looking at a man who burns coffee and argues with machinery." He snorted. "Very romantic." "I do not require romance," she said calmly. "I require truth." That's worse. She stepped closer, closing the distance not as a diplomat, but as herself. The child you carried built you into something unreachable. The woman standing here does not wish to. He swallowed. You don't owe me anything. I know. And I don't owe you. I know that too. The simplicity of it stripped away the last remnants of obligation. A small service drone drifted through the doorway, paused, and projected a reminder about overdue coolant filters. Trevor waved it off irritably. Even my appliances are demanding accountability, he muttered. Zara laughed softly. You prefer predictable crises. I do. And yet you chose this. He considered that carefully. The arbitration chamber, the confrontation, the choice to speak rather than remain silent. I guess I did. The station lights flickered briefly as the diplomatic cruiser adjusted its shield calibration. A ripple of energy passed through the workshop windows, bending starlight for a heartbeat. Thalon Reach will rebuild, Zara said, with or without Valakor's sincerity. And you? I will remain until the agreement is secured. Trevor nodded slowly. Crossroads is not exactly scenic. It is honest. He raised an eyebrow. That's generous. It does not pretend to be anything else. He looked around at the clutter, the grease, the half-repaired engines. For the first time, it did not feel small. You could return home, he said quietly. I could, she agreed, but I am not finished here. He hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered unspoken. Finished with what? Her gaze held his steadily. With understanding what your kindness meant, she said, and what I want it to mean now. The navigation core emitted a contented hum, as if satisfied with its recent therapy session. Trevor exhaled slowly. You're very direct. I have had practice. He nodded once, accepting the clarity she offered. All right, he said. We'll secure the agreement. We'll hold them accountable. And after, she asked. He met her eyes without freezing this time. After, he said carefully, we decide what this is without fire forcing it. A quiet warmth settled between them, not urgent, not overwhelming, just steady. Outside, Crossroads continued its endless rotation. Ships arrived and departed. Trade routes shifted. Corporate calculations recalibrated. Inside the workshop, Trevor Nash and Zara stood amid humming machinery and unfinished work. No longer bound by debt or memory alone, but by something chosen. For the first time in 16 years, the future did not feel like a corridor collapsing behind him. It felt like a door waiting to be opened. Crossroads Station had never looked ceremonial before, but on the cycle the agreement was finalized. Even the metal corridors seemed polished by anticipation. Docking lights shimmered in synchronized patterns. Cargo drones moved with almost suspicious efficiency. Someone, possibly the station AI, in a rare burst of aesthetic ambition, had adjusted the ambient lighting in the central arbitration chamber to something resembling dignified optimism. Trevor stood at the chamber entrance once more, but this time his jacket sat more comfortably on his shoulders. He had stopped adjusting it. You appear less graded, Zara observed quietly. I studied, he replied. For what? For being myself. She regarded him for a long moment, then nodded. Adequate preparation. Inside, Director Halvain looked marginally less immaculate than before. The immaculate quality had not vanished, but it had softened, like a polished surface that had been forced to reflect something inconvenient for too long. The crystalline data seeds floated at the chamber's center, casting layered projections of reconstruction plans across the curved table. Infrastructure grids glowed in steady green. Energy allocations were marked transparently. Oversight boards listed equal representation. The station AI brightened. All parties present, recording active, sarcasm filters recalibrated. Trevor glanced upward. You've grown. I learned from proximity, the AI replied. Halvain cleared his throat. Valakor Consortium acknowledges procedural negligence in the Thalon extraction failure. We commit to funding full reconstruction in the Thalon Reach, with independent oversight. The word negligence hung in the air like a repaired fracture, visible but stable. Zara stood tall, her long ears unadorned but resolute. Acknowledgement accepted, she said. Oversight will remain transparent. Halvain inclined his head. Agreed. The representatives from Zara's people activated the crystalline seeds. The projections locked into shared access. A subtle pulse of confirmation rippled outward, sealing the agreement across encrypted networks. 16 years of silence condensed into a single, deliberate act. Trevor felt it. Not triumph, not vindication, but alignment. Something that had been crooked inside him shifted into place. Halvain approached him after the formalities concluded. The director's drones hovered at a respectful distance. "You have been persistent," Halvain said. "I fix things," Trevor replied. Halvain's gaze flicked briefly to Zara, then back to him. "Your testimony carried weight. It carried truth." Halvain gave a faint, reluctant nod. "The consortium will not forget this." "Good," Trevor said. "Neither will we." There was no hostility in his voice now, only certainty. Halvain departed without further ceremony. The chamber gradually emptied, the hum of projection systems dimming to a soft background pulse. Zara remained standing near the center, watching the reconstruction grid rotate slowly in holographic space. "It is done," she said quietly. "For now," Trevor replied. She turned to him. "That is all anything ever is." He considered that. The colony would be rebuilt, the funding secured, the negligence acknowledged publicly. The political tension that had threatened to spiral into something harsher had been redirected into structure instead of silence. "You don't need me anymore," he said. She stepped closer, close enough that the shifting chamber light traced faint lines along her cheekbones. "I did not need you," she corrected gently. "I chose you." He let that settle without deflecting it. Outside the chamber's transparent ceiling, the diplomatic cruiser disengaged its clamps. Energy fields shimmered as it prepared for departure. "My people will remain to oversee implementation," Zara said, "but I will not return immediately." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "You're staying?" "Yes. Crossroads is not exactly a cultural epicenter." "It is," she replied, glancing toward the bustling corridors beyond the chamber. "It is where lives intersect without pretending they do not." He smiled faintly. "That almost sounds poetic." "It is practical." They walked out of the chamber together. Merchants resumed arguing about tariffs. Dock workers negotiated shift changes. The robotic tailor projected a celebratory display of capes with subtle reconstruction motifs. Trevor pointed at it. "Do not." The tailor dimmed sheepishly. They made their way back to his workshop. The familiar hum greeted them like an old friend who had never quite believed they would leave for long. Trevor paused just inside the doorway. 16 years ago, he had run through fire with a child in his arms, believing the act would vanish into the chaos of war. 16 years later, that child had returned, not to repay a debt, but to question the meaning of it. He looked around at the cluttered benches, the repaired stabilizer, the navigation core that now hummed in calm cooperation. "You rearranged my storage," he said lightly. Zara's lips curved. "It was disorganized." He laughed softly. "You're not wrong." She moved to the console, pulling up the reconstruction grid once more. "The first supply transports depart for the Thalen Reach within 2 cycles. And you'll oversee it from here?" "For a time," he nodded. "I can help with the freight calibration. Make sure the shipments don't get accidentally rerouted." "That would be useful." He leaned against the bench, studying her openly now, without the overlay of memory. The frightened child was no longer present in his mind. In her place stood a woman who had crossed sectors not out of obligation, but clarity. "I carried you out of a burning corridor," he said quietly, "but you carried this further." "We carried it," she corrected. He did not argue. A maintenance alarm chirped faintly from the far wall. Trevor walked over and tapped it into silence. "You know," he said, "I always thought that day defined me by what I couldn't save." Zara's gaze softened. "And now?" He considered his answer carefully. "Now I think it defined me by what I did." The difference felt enormous. She stepped closer, her presence steady and unforced. "You did not run toward fire because you were fearless," she said. "You ran because someone needed you." He met her eyes. "And now?" Her voice was calm, unhurried. "Now I am not a child in a burning corridor." "No," he agreed. "I do not need to be carried." He smiled faintly. "Good. I'm out of practice. But, she continued, I would like to walk beside you. The simplicity of it stripped away any lingering expectation of destiny or debt. He let out a breath that felt like the last of something old leaving him. All right. Outside the workshop, Crossroads rotated steadily through starlight. The diplomatic cruiser's engines flared and then faded into the distance, leaving behind not tension, but infrastructure. Trevor picked up a wrench and set it down again, no longer using it as a shield. So, he said lightly, what does a xenotechnological harmonic specialist do for fun on a trade station? Zara considered. I have not determined that. He grinned. Good. I know a tailor who will try to sell you a cape. Her laughter filled the workshop, clear and unburdened. The navigation core hummed in quiet agreement. The stabilizer fin remained steady. The lights overhead glowed warm and constant. 16 years ago, Trevor Nash had frozen in the face of unexpected words. Now, as Zara stood beside him in a workshop that smelled faintly of grease and possibility, he did not freeze at all. He stepped forward, deliberately, willingly, into a future no longer defined by fire, but by choice.